What is up, Eagles Nation? Listen, this Philadelphia Eagles offense has been facing a lot of scrutiny, and rightfully so, because it's a putrid offense. Now, I don't know who to blame. You know what? Let me take that back. I know who to blame, who I believe should take blame for why this offense is so putrid, mundane, and simple, and quite frankly, lethargic. However, I think it goes a little bit deeper than just the X's and O's with Kevin Patullo and Nick Sirianni and this organization and what Jalen Hurts has been doing, what A.J. Brown has been doing and voicing his concerns, right? I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. I think this has been a problem for Philadelphia, not only since last year, but in prior years in the Nick Sirianni era. Okay. And newsflash, the person that I blame for what's going on in this offense is two entities: Howie Roseman and the organization with Jeffrey Lurie and Nick Sirianni. Those are the people that I blame. We'll get to that in just a moment. Give you a little context here. In Nick Sirianni's tenure, we have had instances where this offense has looked explosive at times. None other than particularly after, when he became a rookie head coach in 2021. We started off 2-5. He gave the play calling over to Shane Steichen, who led us to a 7-3 record towards the end of the year, getting us into the playoffs as the 7th seed. Yes, we got our teeth kicked in against the Bucs, but it was a promising start for the first-year head coach and young quarterback that we had here. 2022, he gets the same coordinator once again, leads us to the promised land, to the Super Bowl after an MVP type of year. He was second in MVP voting, dropped 30 in the Super Bowl, lost on the flag call, right? And then that offseason, we get Brian Johnson. And in that offseason, there was a lot of talk about trying to change the offense a little bit more, adding a little bit more intermediate throws, a little bit more short throws, right? The play calling by Brian Johnson, the sequencing did not make any sense. The offense looked very, very jagged and rough and inconsistent in terms of its design. We get the 10-1 start, ultimately have the collapse after Nick Sirianni puts in Matt Patricia and gets rid of Sean Desai as DC. And then what seemed to be a lethargic offense became even more lethargic as the season went on, which led to the collapse and an offseason where Nick Sirianni's job was on the line. And in that whole offseason, there was a tumultuous relationship with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, and it was well documented. They had a whole ESPN article. They had a whole freaking investigation in regards to Sirianni, this offense, and Jalen Hurts and their views on the offense. Ultimately, what ended up happening was after Sirianni picked Brian Johnson, Desai, and Matt Patricia, the organization stepped in and said, hey, Nick, you want this to work? You let us pick the coach now. You be the CEO coach. Have nothing to do with the offense. He obliged. They ended up falling on Vic Fangio as DC, which ended up being probably one of the greatest hires in Eagles history. And then they brought in Kellen Moore, an outside hire, a guy who they valued personally as a head coach potential candidate back a few years ago before he went to the Dallas Cowboys. However, even in that offseason, there was a little bit of a tumultuous relationship with Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. As in that offseason, there was a lot of talk about whether or not Nick Sirianni would be hands-off on the offense or he would dive in. I'm going to pull up an article here. When Jalen Hurts was asked on whether or not Nick Sirianni was open-minded enough about changing the offense over to Kellen Moore, he goes, in Jalen Hurts faction, I mean, that's a great question. I don't know how to answer that in a very stoic way, right? Then the follow-up question was, how does he see Nick Sirianni so far doing things to help him transition into that role, right? And in Jalen Hurts fashion, he goes, I think he's just been great. The message he's delivering to the team, and he's trying to be intentional with what he's saying. This is what it is. And then he asked him, like, oh, what do you think about Nick Sirianni's future? And then he goes, "Oh, I didn't know he was going anywhere. I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know that there was speculation about the man's job." And it ended up being a very, very weird interview. And then later on, you heard him in press conferences and, previous stints talk about how he's confident in Mr. Lurie, he's confident in Howie Roseman, confidence in Kellen Moore, and Nick. In that order, mind you. And he did that multiple times in press conferences. And the 2024 season started off 2-2. And in that bye week, famously, Jeffrey Lurie came down, spoke to all these guys and said, "Hey, Nick, my quarterback, Jalen, you two better figure this crap out. We got a long season ahead of us. You two better play nice." To the point where after that, Jalen Hurts changed his tune in press conferences, and they had a different approach to the offense because they felt like this was going to work with Saquon Barkley, and the transition to the running attack ultimately led them to the Super Bowl victory with the greatest defense in franchise history and the greatest rushing attack in NFL history, all that jazz. And since that, they had another change in mindset in regards to this offense. Super conservative, don't turn the ball over, ball control, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's led to this. This offense is so conservative, it's gotten to the point where A.J. Brown is tweeting on X Bible verses about turning the shoulder. When people are not listening to you, you shrug your shoulders and let it go off your chest or whatever it is, right? I don't know the exact quote, but you get my point. I give you that context to suggest that there's a lot more deeper levels to why this offense is the way it is. It's not just Kevin Patullo. It's not just the play calling or play design. It's Nick Sirianni, this organization's philosophy on its players and on its offensive design through analytics, through anything that they use to construct the game plan. And to me, A.J. Brown being vocal about it, the reason it's him is because he's got the biggest cachet on the offense. I know you would think Saquon Barkley does, and maybe he does, but he's not necessarily a guy that's a vocal person in that regard. He's rather private, and he's very, mindful about how he speaks and stuff like that. Not that A.J. Brown isn't. I think A.J. Brown's smart, intentional in what he says, how he goes about it. He's savvy, super smart guy. But I think he's got the biggest cachet in the room in terms of the offense. And when he speaks, everybody listens because he's that great of a player. He's that kind of leader in the locker room. And quite frankly, I think he knows what it takes to win because he's done so with this team ever since he's stepped foot in this locker room. And I think Jalen Hurts deep down knows it too. He just can't say it because he's the quarterback. Now, if he did, you would have a little bit more gravitas to that as well, but that's neither here nor there. We'll get into why I think Jalen Hurts feels he's more in agreement with A.J. Brown and the rest of this offense, and why I think Nick Sirianni and this organization is at fault for what's going on. It's going to be a little bit of a lengthy episode, but we're going to dive into all of that in just a moment. But before we do that, let me introduce you to the show. This is the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. I'm your host, Asif Body, and like you, I am a Birds fan who talks about the Birds, only the Birds, nothing but the Philadelphia Eagles. So please do us a favor here, help us grow this channel organically by shooting this video a thumbs up, commenting your thoughts in the comments section below, and subscribing to the channel. Also, check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star review because in the end, it doesn't cost you a damn thing to go ahead and subscribe. All we do is thank you for your support on the opposite side of the camera and on the opposite side of the airways, as I will not ever ask you for a penny in this economy. Thank you very much for your support. Okay. Let's talk about Nick Sirianni's tenure in Philadelphia in terms of his hands being in the cookie jar. Because I think that'll also give a little bit more context as to why I think Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown are right about all of this. And why I think A.J. Brown being vocal gives more insight to what's going on in this locker room and this organization, okay? Obviously, we know in 2021, it was the rookie campaign. They started off 2-5, and in that 2-5 start, it was Nick Sirianni calling the offense. It looked awful. It was not very well, executed. The offense just looked slow. Everybody was questioning whether or not Jalen Hurts can throw the football, right? Then Shane Steichen gets to play calling duties as Nick Sirianni felt he was neglecting the rest of the team as a head coach. And listen, to his credit, it was the right call to do so. Because I actually think Nick Sirianni does a good job managing the game for the most part. I think he has a relatively decent feel in terms of when to call timeouts, when to call certain packages and all that jazz, right? Shane Steichen takes over the play calling. Like I said, we go 7-3 to finish the year. We get into the playoffs. We get our asses kicked by the Bucs. 2022, he's the offensive play caller again. We get to the Super Bowl, as we all know. We talked about this at the beginning of the show. We lose in epic fashion to the Kansas City Chiefs after a very, very questionable flag. And then after that, we get Brian Johnson in the building. Calls the offense, ultimately leads us to a 10-1 start to begin the year. We get the collapse at the end of the year where the offense didn't make any sense. And at that point, after the San Francisco 49er game, after we got our teeth kicked in by them, I think the organization and Nick Sirianni had to really sit down and think about where exactly are we going here with this offense, which is why they came and started interfering a little bit more in what was going on. And then you saw Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown do a little ad-libbing in that Seahawks game where instead of taking a check down, he takes the shot to A.J. Brown up the sideline to try to get into field goal range. And then Julian Love picks it off at safety, talks his shit at the end of the game. Ultimately, we lose to Seattle against the backup quarterback, which at the time I believe was, forgive me for forgetting the name, Drew Lock. Jeez, what a bad moment that was. Ultimately, it led us to getting our asses kicked by the Bucs once again, this time by Baker Mayfield in an offseason where Nick Sirianni is getting questioned about his job. Jalen Hurts not necessarily supporting him in that front, right? Not giving him a lot of support. Questioning whether or not the directions of the offense is where it should be going. So then the organization looked at it and said, hey, Nick, listen, dude, you can't pick the coach right now. You're going to listen to us. We're picking coaches here, okay? You're going to be your CEO title head coach. You stay out of the way. And that was the talk of the offseason in 2023 and 24. Nick's got to stay out of the way. Let the coaches do their job. Everything will be cool. The talent will take over. So Nick Sirianni took a step back, didn't really put much time in the play calling aspect of things, kind of was running the practices, running the schedule, doing all these things the CEO would do as a head coach, managing the game, doing all that jazz, right? Ultimately, it led us to winning a Super Bowl. So when the correlation here so far, if you can't pick it up, or you can't pick up what I'm putting down thus far, every time Nick Sirianni has stepped away in terms of being involved in the offense, we see some good results. 2021, Shane Steichen takes over the play calling halfway through the year. We win 7 out of freaking 10 games. 2022, he's out of the play calling once again. We get to a Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts has an MVP type year. 2023, we start off 10-1 after getting our asses kicked by the Niners. Nick Sirianni tries to come in, tries to fix up the job because we were feeling that loss pretty heavily. All of a sudden, we go into the collapse. 2023-2024 offseason, after he saves his own job, the organization says, hey, don't get involved here. Stay out of the game plan. You do you. We'll take care of the coaching. Let the coaches do their thing. Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio come into the building. Ultimately, it leads us to getting a Super Bowl title. And now we're back here at the same place where Nick Sirianni has cachet now because he's a Super Bowl championship head coach. So the organization says, okay, we'll give a dog a bone here. Sirianni, you get to choose the OC. So Nick Sirianni decides to put it in Kevin Patullo, the man who has never called the play in his life. With an offense that's filled with Super Bowl MVP Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Jahan Dotson as wide receiver 3, and this offensive line. So much so, I mean, rather, this offense has been so bad under Kevin Patullo and his play calling. Not only do you see the plays getting in late and Jalen Hurts only having 6 seconds to call audibles and whatnot and to observe the defense, it's gotten to the point where we're worse in the run game. We're worse in passing. We're worse in yards per attempt. But the thing that we're really good in is red zone, which we always have been good in. We're pretty decent on third down for the most part. I lied about that. We're terrible on third down. I think we lead the league in 3 and outs. A.J. Brown is off to his worst start of his career. He's on pace to get 650 yards receiving as being a top 3 wide receiver in all of football. And Devontae Smith, as clutch as he is, he's having as bad of a season as A.J. Brown, quote unquote, if you could even call it bad. We get to the point where we're down against the Rams in the second half. We're deciding, hey, you know what? We got nothing to lose here. Let's chuck the ball down the field. Let's start moving the ball through the passing game. And guess what? We erase the deficit, take the lead, ultimately win the game. We play the Buccaneers, a house of horrors for us, a team that's had Jalen Hurts' number. What do? We want to fix that narrative as an organization. We want to get this quarterback back on schedule here and prove that he's every bit as good as we believe he is. And they go out and throw the football in the first half to the point where they're up 26-3, basically. 24-3, excuse me. 24-3. Second half, foot off the gas. We stop throwing the ball. Don't put the ball in the quarterback's hands. The Buccaneers go on a run. Make it a ball game at some point. We ultimately win the game 31-25. But it begs the question, in that game, why was the offense so excellent in the first half? And then when we took our foot off the gas in the second half, we went 0 for 8 in the passing game, barely averaging 2 yards a rush in that game, leading the Buccaneers to get back in the ball game. It makes no sense with this offense. The talent here is immense. And we're having such fluctuations in the performances and the outputs. And for whatever reason, it feels like the organization, the coaching staff, does not trust this offense to be run by Jalen Hurts. Now, I think this was an offense that's not necessarily meant for a guy like Jalen Hurts. I think Nick Sirianni and the rest of his coaching staff would prefer somebody who's a little bit more traditional as a pocket passer. And that's why you see them not trust Jalen Hurts to do things. And it's led to frustration by Jalen Hurts. And now we get into his comments over the years. As I mentioned before, Jalen Hurts wanted to change the offense a little bit more in 2023, be a little bit more diverse. They tried doing that, ended up resulting in more turnovers and issues with picking up pass protections, because what we ended up finding out was that the quarterbacks in Philadelphia didn't set pass protections. They had Jason Kelce do that. And that was the year Jason Kelce ended up retiring. And after that, the organization made the shift and, due to the demand of the quarterback, said, hey, I want the responsibility to check at the line. I want to set pass protections. I want to be the one to have my hands on the, not the pogo stick, the joystick, so to speak. So they gave him that clearance. They gave him that autonomy. Ultimately, it led us to a Super Bowl, like I said, with Kellen Moore and the changing coaching staff, etc. We already talked about the fact that he didn't have much to say in terms of confidence after Nick Sirianni during the collapse year for Jalen Hurts. And then in the NFC title game, we drop a 50 burger in the NFC title game of 2024. And in the press conference, he ends up saying this at his locker room: they let me out of my straitjacket. And then that was the narrative that was carried into the Super Bowl. Let the man out of his straitjacket. And guess what? They did, because you had nothing to lose in terms of the turnover battle. You didn't have to be cautious. You didn't have to hide anything so other teams can steal crap. No, it's the final game of the year for all the marbles. And guess what you do? You blow out the Chiefs. You put 40 on their head. And he wins Super Bowl MVP. And again, it wasn't like he was throwing the ball all over the yard either. 240 yards in that game. But what he was excellent in his decision making, efficient in the red zone, led the offense to what it needed to do, put the ball down the field. And then, as I mentioned before, in the Rams game, second half, he had the explosion on the offensive side of the ball. Really was demonstrative with Kevin Patullo on the sideline, yelling at him, getting animated with him and AJ Brown, right? Ultimately, it was AJ Brown's best game of the year. 109 yards and a touchdown, 6 catches, ultimately winning the game against the Rams. And then obviously the Bucs game in the first half, the House of Horrors, trying to address those things, and then we end up winning that ball game. And now we're going into a game against the Denver Broncos here, where the question is now, what's wrong with this offense? Because AJ Brown, after the Bucs game, had that tweet. And people are asking whether or not AJ Brown should get traded. Why is AJ Brown being selfish? Why is he so pouty? He had his targets in that game. I want every one of the people who sit here and are going to criticize AJ Brown to just do this for me. Look at look at all the games Philadelphia played this year. I want you to just watch. If you have access to all 22, go for it. Or just watch the games in general. I want you to look at some of the things they have AJ Brown run as a wide receiver. Look at some of the concepts that they have run in Philadelphia. You tell me if that's a route, if that's a play, if these are sequences that you would go out there and run with excitement and understanding like, hey, I can get the ball anytime here. When you look at this offense, like I mentioned before and what everybody talks about, it's so predictable. You know exactly what AJ is going to run. He's running either a hitch, he's running a slant, he's running a 9, a post occasionally, and every now and then an out. That's it. No double moves, no creative route concepts, no motion, doesn't get put in the slot, nothing. And can you imagine you go play after play and you say, hey, AJ, go back out there against that cornerback, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to trick him. Instead of running the 9, a straight deep shot, you're going to pretend to run the deep route and then just turn around and don't move. That'll confuse them. Or let's run the most unstoppable play for you, AJ Brown, that everybody knows. The 5-yard slant. Let's shade you a little bit more towards the line of scrimmage and inside the play so that you have enough room to run the out. All of these things you could telegraph. All of these things are predictable. I mentioned it before in past episodes. I know the routes AJ is going to run. For an NFL defense, you can anticipate it by just putting a guy in line with where he's going to run his route, have a guy over the top of him at safety, and you basically stop AJ Brown in this offense. Only when the Rams decided to play conservative in their coverage, played zone and didn't put anybody doubling him or not anticipating routes, did AJ Brown show his skill set. And again, they were more explosive in their offense. They started attacking the defenses more. Sometimes you force the ball to AJ Brown because that's just the right thing to do. And guess what you get? Good results. I wouldn't be excited if I'm AJ Brown for this offense either. I'd be just as livid as him because he knows, and we all know as an offense, we're capable of more. And by we, I mean the Philadelphia Eagles. I say we because I'm a fan. Everybody knows this offense is capable of dropping 28 to 35 to 40 points a game if you open up the passing game and let the running game feed off the pass and vice versa. The problem is you have an organization and a coaching staff that is ultimately trying to play so damn conservative. They're so scared of turning the football over that they're not willing to take any risk in the passing attack. And that's why you don't see Jalen Hurts pushing the ball down the field. It's why his yards per attempt is averaging about 6 yards per throw, as opposed to 8 or 9 like it has been in the years we've gone to the Super Bowl. A.J. Brown sees it. Devontae sees it. Saquon sees it. Even Jalen Hurts sees it. However, those other 3 guys, Saquon, Devontae, and Jalen, are not vocal guys. There's only one vocal guy on the offense. 2, excuse me. You have Jordan Mailata, obviously. He's not necessarily going to complain about the passing attack versus the running attack. His job is to go out there and block and dominate, and he hasn't had a good year either. But A.J. Brown's the one with cachet. So, wearing the C on his chest, being the best player on the team, having the most cachet, he's going to say, you know what? Let me be the one to speak and voice the concerns of the offense. I'll take the heat because I can deal with it. And so he speaks. Doesn't feel heard. Goes about his business the next week. Does that for a few weeks, and then it ultimately leads to the X message that he posted, the tweet. Who was that reference towards? Quite frankly, I think he was speaking on behalf of the wide receiver room and all the other skill positions, and he was pointing it directly towards the quarterback and the coaching staff. I understand it. I support A.J. Brown in this because I ultimately think he's right. What the hell is going on in this offense? You have too many skilled players to not find ways to get them the ball. And it shouldn't be so hard to get them the football. And I keep hearing reports about people saying that it's due to the limitations of the quarterback, and that's why this offense is the way it is. And to that I say, bullshit. It makes no sense to suggest that Jalen Hurts is the reason for the ineptitude on the offense due to his limitations. When also these same reporters, the same people talk about how much of an excellent playmaker he is, how great of a deep ball thrower he is, how smart of a quarterback he is. I always say he's one of the best decision makers, if not the best decision maker in football, and other pundits agree. It doesn't explain why in all the big moments that you need plays from Jalen Hurts, he goes out and makes them. When you need a drive to go out and win the game, when you have to go and throw the ball, he's out there doing it and getting the job done. When you need him to drop big games in big moments in big spots, he comes up time after time after time after time after time after time after time. But no, my quarterback's limited. My quarterback has a very limited scope in terms of his skill set. And that's why the offense is the way it is. Could it be that the coaching staff in particular might be limited with the offense that we have? Are we sure this offensive scheme is not limited due to the limitations of our head coach, Nick Sirianni? That I am not going to sit here and suggest that this man does not deserve to be head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. Not what I'm saying at all. Like I mentioned before, I think Nick Sirianni has proven to be a really damn good head coach, setting up the culture, setting up the schedule for practices, being healthy for the most part, being conscious of the health of these guys and their players, being prepared for all the different ways that we can win ball games. Again, I'm complaining we're 4-0, and we've won each game in different fashions. Now, we've had some luck on the opposite side of the field, 100%. But I've seen games where we won with our defense. I've seen games where the passing game came into play. I've seen games where the running attack has dominated. I've seen games where special teams dictated the outcomes. We win in all these different ways, forcing turnovers every week, not turning the ball over, being a relatively disciplined football team outside of a few instances this year. All those things are reflective of coaching, and he has to get credit for those things. However, when it comes to offensive scheme and design and playmaking and sequencing, play calling, you're telling us as Eagle fans we can't say that the head coach and the organization and the coaching staff is limited? Of course, in my opinion, they are. I think that's evidently clear that they're limited in their scheme, in their design, in their play calling, because there's no other explanation to suggest why A.J. Brown, for a majority of his career in Philadelphia, has gotten 1,500 yards receiving. And even last year, he missed time. He was on pace for 1,300 yards that year. To now, all of a sudden, he's getting 600 yards for the year he's on pace for. That Jalen Hurts is averaging 6 yards per attempt. Devontae Smith can't even get a look half the time. We rarely throw it to Dallas Goedert. And we're running plays with Saquon Barkley into the up the middle every single time, inside zone, after every defensive player just knows, hey, he's going to go hit this hole behind Landon Dickerson. That's what he's going to do. And we keep running the same plays over and over again to the point where he's averaging just 3 yards a carry. Against the Bucs, he averaged 2 yards a carry. But no, the limitations are on the quarterback. The limitations are on the execution of these plays. Could it be that the plays just suck? That the offensive design and the scheming sucks? That the play calling stinks? Could it also be that once again we have evidence to suggest that when Nick Sirianni is involved in the offensive game plan, whether it's picking the coach, whether it's play calling, whether it's sequencing, somehow when he's directly involved, it looks sluggish, it looks slow, it looks simple. But all the times where Nick Sirianni stepped away from either play calling or design, or the organization stepped in and said, hey, you don't touch the offense, let them do their thing. We've had either one of the greatest seasons for a quarterback in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts in 2022 and that offensive output, or one of the greatest rushing attacks we've ever seen in the NFL and one of the best 2-game stretches we've seen from an offense in the NFC title game and Super Bowl with Kellen Moore. I don't think it's a coincidence. It's not to suggest that he's a bad head coach. He's not. Mind you, they have won 20 of the last 21 games that they have played as a team. They're undefeated when Saquon, Jalen, Devontae, and AJ have completed a game. They haven't lost when all 4 players are on the field from opening tap till the clock hits 0. However, every time they win, it shouldn't be by the skin of their teeth. It shouldn't be to the point where they're dragging and clawing and fighting for every single yard that they have. It should be much easier. There are lesser talented offenses that look much more efficient, much more explosive, and quite frankly, are more sustainable than what we're seeing right now. And when A.J. Brown sees that and he voices that concern, whether it's on X, whether it's to the public media and all that stuff, now people are going to say that he's the monster, he's the jackass, he's the selfish one. When in reality, he's just pointing out the obvious. He's just pointing out like, hey, this ain't good enough. We're better than this. We have instances where the quarterback has said in press conferences, "Oh, he let me out of my straitjacket today." How do you like that? Is that what you wanted to see? But here's the other problem. Because ultimately wins matter to a quarterback more so than the wide receiver, than the running back, than any other position on the field. Jalen Hurts has been put in a weird position. Yes, he wants to progress the offense. Of course, he wants to develop more as a passer. You see it every year. He's gotten better at the line of scrimmage. He's gotten better with setting up protections. He's gotten better with navigating the play, going through each read. If you notice this year, he goes through a lot of his reads for the most part. Now, whether or not you believe he throws it on time is a whole different matter, and I agree with you to a point. But when his first read, his second read, his third read's not there, he gets to his fourth one pretty quickly. Like I said, Jalen Hurts is put in a tough spot because while he agrees with A.J. Brown and while he believes that this offense could be more explosive, on the opposite side of things, on the other hand, you got this organization, Nick Sirianni, saying, hey, 20 of 21, kiss my ass. That's the way we're going to win football games because it works. We have a track record of it now. Every time we play like this, more often than not, we're winning. And the one loss that we have was when Jalen Hurts got concussed against the Commanders. A game in which people believe if he played the full game, we probably would have won. Now, I don't believe in that excuse because I think Kenny Pickett stepped in and played just fine, and the defense shouldn't be giving up 36 points in that game. But that's neither here nor there. Point being is, this offense has too much talent for it to look the way it does. And the only thing that I can think of that is an explanation for why this offense is the way it is. Again, I hate to do it, but it might be because our head coach might be more involved in the offensive game plan than he's letting on, than this organization is letting on. And anytime he has his hand in the cookie jar ends up smelling like doo-doo. That's just the reality of it. And maybe, just maybe, in the second half of that Rams game, it was just an instance where, hey, you know what? We got nothing to lose. Let's just chuck it. Kevin, take over the play calling. Do what you got to do. I don't know if Kevin Patullo's bad. I don't know if the organization is telling them to run the offense the way that they're doing. And Nick is subscribing to that and making that the game plan. You can tell that this offense and the skill set players here are not excited for the game plan. You see it in the press conferences before the games happen. Last week, after the Rams game, or the week of the Rams game, excuse me, have you looked at the A.J. Brown interview in that week? How upset he looked, how distraught he looked, how annoyed he looked. He knew what the game plan was. And that first half was putrid. The Bucs game, everybody knew what the game plan was. Putrid offense in the second half. It's why you get angry. It's why you see incompetent play calling. The game, the play calling, the scheming does not fit the personnel. And it's because Nick wants to coach a certain way. Conservative, no turning the ball over, etc. And on the opposite end, you have players who are like, hey, we're better than these guys. Let's just bust their ass. Let's throw the ball around. And Jalen Hurts, to his credit, when he's called for the opportunity to do so, he does throw the ball around. And ultimately, he doesn't turn the ball over. Which then leads me to my last question, and I'll leave it at here because, again, lengthy episode. I apologize. Why does this organization and this coaching staff feel so hesitant to let Jalen just fling the football? Why do they believe that he's limited in his capacity to run the offense? But when you put Kenny Pickett in, when you put Tanner McGee in, the offense looks pretty smooth in terms of play calling and how they call the play. It looks like a different offense. And it's not because, they're just operating the offense better. They're literally calling a different game. They're literally calling a different offense for those guys. And they call something completely different for Jalen Hurts. It makes no sense. So I don't know. Let me know what your thoughts in the comment section are. I'm curious to believe who you believe is to blame for the incompetence on the offense. Is A.J. Brown just being a baby? Does Jalen Hurts stink at football? Does Kevin Patullo suck as an OC? Or is it really just this organization and Nick Sirianni meddling with the game plan, having their hands in the cookie jar, and it's showcasing out as a shitty product? To me, I believe there's more of a track record to suggest that Sirianni and this organization has had their fingerprints all over this offense the past couple of years. And because we don't have the elite running game like we did last year, the historic running game like we did last year, soon the chickens are going to come home to roost. And they're going to look for a scapegoat like they always do. We did it with Brian Johnson. We did it with John Desai. We did it with Matt Patricia. And ultimately, I think at some point in next year's offseason, there's going to be more discussions about whether or not A.J. Brown is going to be a Philadelphia Eagle. It's going to be a damn shame because he's not wrong here. If anything, he's been anything but a diva. And I know that sounds weird to say, but can you imagine if Justin Jefferson were on this offense, how he would react? What about Jamar Chase? What about CeeDee Lamb? Tyreek Hill? Puka Nacua? Devontae Adams? Name me any great receiver. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Name me any great receiver that would put up with this offense. A.J. Brown consistently has been a model citizen in Philadelphia. And the little outbursts on Twitter, reading the book on the sideline, that is nothing compared to what other players in this league have been capable of doing when they're upset about targets, about the offensive direction, etc. So Philadelphia is lucky to have a guy like A.J. Brown. Philadelphia is lucky to have a player like Jalen Hurts. I hope sooner than later that this organization, Nick Sirianni, and this offensive coaching staff understands just how lucky they are and lets these players showcase the skill set that they have. Because if they do, we're repeating as champions. And there's really nobody in the league that's going to be able to stop this offense if they let Jalen Hurts out of his straitjacket. Hey! Thank you so much for watching the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. If you want to continue to support the channel, please hit the like and subscribe button down below. Also, check us out on Instagram and TikTok at Riding the Bench Eagles Pod. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, we're on there. Thank you so much for listening, and please join us next time here at the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast.